Chapter 2263. This identity token wasn't much of a treasure, but it could easily store information that couldn't be damaged. It contained a wisp of Yi Qianxian's divine sense. Unless it was someone stronger than him, no one would be able to destroy this token. Like this, even if the entire Star Alliance died, as long as this token remained, Yi Qianxian would be able to know who had attacked True Spill Continent. This would completely put an end to the thoughts of those from Sky Capital who wanted to attack True Spill Continent. As Situ Mayor saw this, she finally couldn't bear it any longer. "Your Highness." She looked at the token that Yi Qianxian had thrown out. That was the token of Sky Capital's young emperor. It represented Yi Qianxian's status. How many people yearned for it but couldn't get it? Yi Qianxian had so easily thrown it to someone from the Star Alliance. Not only that, but they had also offended his people. And everything he did was for Luo Qingtong. Thinking of this, Situ Mayor fiercely clenched her teeth. "Your Highness is being too kind." She tried to hide the coldness and jealousy in her eyes. She swept her gaze around and saw Mo Zhuling looking at Yi Qianxian with a dazed expression. As a woman, she was well aware of the other party's gaze. Another person who coveted His Highness. These ant-like people, how could they overestimate themselves? This woman, the woman who had seized His Highness' favor, was also her. Situ Mayor's eyes were cold. She lifted her hand and sucked Mo Zhuling into her palm. As the saying goes, you can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. You dare to be disrespectful to His Highness without any punishment? Where is the dignity of His Highness in Sky Capital? As Situ Mayor spoke, she lifted her hand and blasted a force into Mo Zhuling's body. In an instant, Mo Zhuling screamed. All the bones and flesh in her body were instantly smashed to smithereens by Situ Mayor's power, leaving only the outer layer of skin intact. Unfortunately, Situ Mayor's power was protecting her heart, preventing her from dying no matter what. In the blink of an eye, Mo Zhuling had turned into a pile of minced meat in Situ Mayor's hands. Looking at her disgusting appearance, Situ Mayor sneered disdainfully in her heart. Such an ant-like person dared to covet His Highness? It was a pity that the person in His Highness's heart could not make a move. Otherwise, she would definitely let him know what it meant to be unable to live and unable to die. But it didn't matter. There would always be a chance in the future. Without His Highness, what was the other party? Situ Mayor chuckled, but her eyes were cold. She threw Mo Zhuling in front of the Star Alliance members, then half knelt on the ground and begged Yi Qianxian, "Your Highness, please return to the palace. Your Highness, please return to the palace." The heavenly Xian guards replied in unison. Their voices shook the starry sky and their aura soared to the heavens. Yi Qianxian glanced at her coldly but did not say anything. He had never intended to let Mo Zhuling off. Since the other party had already made a move, then so be it. "Let's go." Yi Qianxian, Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others rushed into the huge array formation. In the next second, the huge array formation reversed. In an instant, everyone disappeared in front of everyone. Only the remaining monstrous aura, as well as the starry sky region that was constantly surging and breaking into pieces, told everyone in the Star Alliance that this was not a dream. Chapter 2264. Hurry. Looking at the token in his hand that was engraved with the words Sky Capital and Dark, the Star Alliance's peak powerhouse's voice trembled as he shouted, "Immediately send out orders. From now on, in every star field where the Star Alliance is located, the people of True Spill Continent are not to be provoked. If anyone dares to touch a single hair of theirs, I will chop them up and feed them to the dogs. Also, send more people to True Spill Continent. All of them must be peak purple venerable powerhouses." He stamped his feet. "Disguise. Disguise them all. Don't let anyone know. Also, no one is allowed to speak of today's matters." His voice was sharp and shrill. As for the peak powerhouses of the Star Alliance, they didn't say anything. All of them looked as if they were about to face a great enemy as they began to make preparations. Yi Qianxian had said that if anything happened to True Spill Continent, then they, along with the entire Star Alliance, would all be punished with the same crime as those who had attacked. The peak powerhouses of the Star Alliance couldn't care about the life or death of others, but they couldn't ignore their own life or death. True Spill Continent could not suffer even the slightest mishap. As for Uncle Zhang and the other members of the Star Alliance, their faces were deathly pale. They looked at Mo Zhuling, who had been thrown in front of them like a pile of mud. Their hearts were filled with unspeakable fear and regret. This time they had really kicked an iron plate. Who would have thought that Yi Qianxian's background would be so great? His strength was actually so fierce. As the crowd stood there and watched the peak powerhouses of the Star Alliance disperse, they all understood. This time the skies of the Star Alliance were about to change. In the past, within the Star Alliance, the Alliance Master's strength reigned supreme. As for the other highest elders of the main hall, they all supported the Alliance Master. However, now that Mo Zhuling had caused such a ruckus, the Alliance Master's prestige was bound to plummet. In addition, with the token that xianxia had given them, although it might not be able to help the peak powerhouses of the Star Alliance, it wouldn't be able to help them deal with the Alliance Master. But with this token, the Alliance Master and the others wouldn't be able to deal with the peak powerhouses of the Star Alliance. Like this, these people would be able to stand on equal footing with the Alliance Master. The entire situation of the Star Alliance would change because of this. This time, eldest young Miss had really caused them and the Alliance Master to suffer. Uncle Zhang and the others' hearts were filled with regret. Especially Uncle Zhang. If he had a chance to start over Spill Continent. He could only feel regret in his heart, but there was nothing else he could do. The group of people picked up Mo Zhuling, who was lying on the ground like a pile of mud, and left. As for the people of True Spill Continent, they still didn't know what was going on. But with Yi Qianxian collecting the auras of the space fluctuations, Su Yu and the others knew that he would definitely find a way to find Luo Qingtong's whereabouts. And from the reactions of Yi Qianxian and Bei Qin, it could be seen that although Luo Qingtong had gone missing, she might not necessarily be in mortal danger. Everyone's hearts settled down. Su Yu and the others made a firm resolution in their hearts. They would work hard to cultivate their strength so that they could rush out of the Stargate in the future and go to the outer realms to find Luo Qingtong. Master, wait for us. Chapter 2265. The expressions of Su Xiaoxiao and the others were also very cold. The group walked in front of the Grand Supreme Dean without a word and said in a deep voice, "Grand Supreme Dean, we want to cultivate in the Heavenly Yuan sect. We will provide all the cultivation resources ourselves. We only need the people of the Heavenly Yuan sect to provide the mystic realm and cultivation grounds. In the hidden world, the beast-taming King Valley was destroyed and the Star Alliance Hall no longer existed. Now, the strongest was the Heavenly Yuan sect. Of course, although the other sects were not bad, they were still lacking compared to the Heavenly Yuan sect. Su Xiaoxiao and the others wanted to improve their strength, so they naturally chose the strongest Heavenly Yuan sect. And they were not afraid that the people of the Heavenly Yuan sect would harm them. This was because although Luo Qingtong was not here, all the people of the hidden world, except for the Heavenly Yuan sect, had already sworn loyalty to Luo Qingtong and would be her slaves for the rest of their lives. They completely obeyed the orders of Su Yu and the others. It could be said that even if Luo Qingtong was not here, the entire hidden world was still in the hands of Su Yu and the others. Even if the people of the Heavenly Yuan sect had any ideas, they would not be able to stir up any waves. Moreover, these days of interaction were enough for them to see the nature of the people of the Heavenly Yuan sect. They were definitely not people who would go back on their words. They still understood the character of the Grand Supreme Dean. Thinking of this, Su Xiaoxiao and the others could not help but tear up. That was their boss. Even if she was not here, she would still arrange their future very well. In this life, they were so lucky to be able to follow by Luo Qingtong's side. Boss, just you wait. We will definitely cultivate well and then look for you. Little Tyrant Yuan and the others said silently in their hearts. No matter how difficult the future was, no matter what they faced, no matter if they were going to face a storm of blades or a rain of swords, they would not give up. Boss, wait for us. We will definitely find you. Everyone clasped the purified immortal jade bones in their hands tightly. Their hearts were filled with determination. The Grand Supreme Dean looked at them and nodded solemnly. Don't worry. Your problem will be the Heavenly Yuan sect's problem in the future. Moreover, the Sky Yuan sect's intention to follow Luo Qingtong will not change. Master, don't you agree? The Grand Supreme Dean looked at the Heaven Yuan sect master and the others. That's right. The Heavenly Yuan sect master and the others said without hesitation. Everything I've said before is still valid. In the future, the Heavenly Yuan sect will be under Luo Qingtong. In the entire hidden world, Luo Qingtong reigns supreme. There will be no change in this matter. In addition, if you and the people around you want to cultivate in the Heavenly Yuan sect, you are always welcome. Su Xiaoxiao and the others had gone through life and death with Luo Qingtong, so they were very close to each other. Naturally, the Heaven Branch sect master and the others would not be stingy with their own cultivation grounds. Although Luo Qingtong wasn't here, the hidden world was still her world. A young girl's planning was hard to find in the world. Everyone from the Heavenly Yuan sect gasped in amazement. If it weren't for the fact that Luo Qingtong's departure was so sudden, even Yi Qianxian would not have been able to find any clues. They would have thought that Luo Qingtong had arranged it herself. In reality, Luo Qingtong was completely unaware of all this. Buzz. Chapter 2266. What's going on? Luo Qingtong furrowed her brows and looked at her surroundings. She had already woken up and opened her eyes when the huge whirlpool engulfed her. However, it was too late and she was sucked into the whirlpool. Luo Qingtong looked at her surroundings and guessed that she was sucked into a place similar to a teleportation space. Luo Qingtong furrowed her brows. She had been teleporting for a long time, but she still hadn't arrived. This was definitely not an ordinary teleportation array. Luo Qingtong vaguely sensed a trace of inscription power from the aura of this array. Just like Yi Qianxian, Luo Qingtong's first thought was that it had something to do with the Immortal Slayer Palace. Could it be that the enemies who massacred the Immortal Slayer Palace and forced Tian Mingzi to flee with the inheritance of the Immortal Slayer Palace had come looking for her? Luo Qingtong could only think of one reason. Although she didn't know how the other party knew of her existence and how she was sucked into this teleportation space, Luo Qingtong was very shocked. She had already obtained the inheritance of the Immortal Slayer Palace. The 9-story exquisite pagoda and the life and death sword had already recognized her as their master. Adding Little Pig, Luo Qingtong's enmity with the enemies of the Immortal Slayer Palace was huge. It was impossible to reconcile. If the other party wanted to obtain the inheritance of the Immortal Slayer Palace, they had to kill her. Then they had to use her blood to break the contract between her, the 9-story exquisite pagoda, the life and death sword, and Little Pig. This was absolutely impossible. Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. Her life was only in her hands. Whoever wanted to kill her, she would kill them first. However, the power in her body had completely disappeared. It was not the time to fight with the other party. As Luo Qingtong thought about it, her brows furrowed. At this moment, splat. In her mind, Little Pig rushed out of the 9-story exquisite pagoda. What happened? It looked at the space where Luo Qingtong was at the moment. The space around her was rapidly flowing away. Suddenly, its two small green bean eyes widened. It had just fainted due to exhaustion. How could Luo Qingtong appear in such a place? It's a teleportation array. It stared at the surroundings and asked Luo Qingtong, "Why are you here?" Wasn't she arguing with that huge skeleton? How did he appear here in the blink of an eye? Could it be that the land of the fallen immortals was hiding some kind of secret? Little Pig had no idea what happened after that. Naturally, he didn't know that Luo Qingtong had already killed that skeleton. It was a complete accident that it appeared here. I don't know. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. I can feel the power of inscriptions. I wonder if it has something to do with the enemies of the Immortal Slayer Palace. I was suddenly sucked here. Luo Qingtong briefly explained her situation to Little Pig. In an instant, Little Pig jumped up and down in excitement. Are you serious? You don't have any strength left. Oh, this is bad. Little Pig jumped up and down like an ant on a hot pan. If Luo Qingtong had strength, it wouldn't be so panicked. This woman had always had strange abilities and extraordinary means. She could use 10% of her strength as 10% of her strength. As long as she had strength, Little Pig believed that she could find a way to escape. However, if she didn't have strength, she would be doomed. Chapter 2267. Little Pig was anxious as he thought about it. Luo Qingtong's expression was still calm. She wasn't worried about whether she could escape or not. As long as the enemies of the Immortal Slayer Palace wanted to get something from the Immortal Slayer Palace, she had a way to escape from them. Luo Qingtong had been hunted down countless times in her previous life. This was not a big deal for her. The only thing that Luo Qingtong was worried about was her face. She raised her hand and touched her face. Once this face fell into the eyes of the other party, even if she was lucky enough to escape this time, her identity would not be able to be hidden. At that time, the enemies could come to the true Spill continent to find her. In this way, unless she didn't go back for the rest of her life, they would find her sooner or later. Moreover, what about Grandpa and the others? Luo Qingtong frowned as she thought of this. It wasn't that she didn't think of disguising herself, but the transmission space was extremely unstable. It wasn't convenient to disguise herself here. More importantly, the enemies of the Immortal Slayer Palace were very powerful. Her disguise technique could deceive ordinary people, but it might not work if she wanted to deceive them. Luo Qingtong frowned even harder as she thought of this. At this moment, chirp chirp chirp. In Luo Qingtong's sleeve, there was a faint and weak cry. It was the small sector beast that had almost been sucked dry. It had come back to its senses and was struggling in her sleeve trying to get out. Luo Qingtong listened to its voice. and her eyes suddenly lit up. She took the little guy out. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The little guy was twisting in her hand as if it was protesting something. It was a sector beast. It wanted a hug. Did you know that it wanted a hug? However, Luo Qingtong didn't understand what it was saying at all. She ignored it and said to Little Pig, "Humph, ask it if it has any power left. The kind that can turn me into my previous life's appearance?" Luo Qingtong remembered that when she had flashed through the small sector beast space of consciousness, she had seen an image of herself from her previous life. There was a huge birthmark on her face that covered more than half of her face. He looked as ferocious as an evil spirit. Such an image was enough to cover her face and prevent the enemies of the Immortal Slayer Palace from recognizing her identity. At that time, she would find a way to escape and return to True Spill Continent. The world was so big, where could the other party find him? He didn't believe that the other party would be able to use such a method of crossing star fields again and again. What's more, he wouldn't give them the chance to do so. At that time, she would naturally set up layers of protection around herself. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she stared at the little ball in her hand with a burning gaze. Chirp. The little dumpling felt goosebumps all over its body from being stared at by her, and the little ahog on top of its head instantly stood up. It stared at Luo Qingtong, wondering why she was looking at it like that. Did she think that it was useless because it could only help her recall the power of her previous life once? Chirp, chirp, chirp. It was wronged. The power of the previous life that she had chosen was too strong. It was completely beyond its ability, okay? Woo woo woo, it was still a baby. How could she treat it like this? Chapter 2268. While the two little guys were humming and chirping, Luo Qingtong felt the space around them fluctuating more and more violently. It was obvious that the teleportation formation was about to reach its destination. How is it? Luo Qingtong said in a deep voice when she saw Little Pig turning to look at her. It says it can, Little Pig's voice sounded. Before it could finish, Luo Qingtong gave the final word, "Okay, let it transform. Little furball, transform me into someone from my previous life, the one with the birthmark on my face." Luo Qingtong gave Little Furball a brief instruction. She knew that Little Pig could understand her words. The reason why she let Little Pig talk to it was because Luo Qingtong couldn't understand it. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong would be able to communicate with it directly without Little Pig. Chirp chirp. Luo Qingtong's voice sounded, and Little Furball immediately nodded. At this time, the space around them fluctuated more violently. It was as if Luo Qingtong was going to be ejected in the next second. Quick! Luo Qingtong said to Little Furball. Once she was ejected, it would be too late even if she could transform. Once her face was exposed, her identity would also be exposed. Chirp chirp. Hearing her voice, Little Furball suddenly jumped up. Then a force from its body landed on Luo Qingtong's body. With a boom, the space around them fluctuated more violently when its force landed on Luo Qingtong's body. In the next second, Luo Qingtong was ejected. Hey, wait a minute, I haven't finished speaking. While Luo Qingtong and Little Furball were talking, Little Pig was about to speak. However, it was too late. The space around them fluctuated violently. With a boom, both Little Pig and Luo Qingtong were ejected. Ow ow ow, Master. Little Pig's round and chubby body tumbled in the air. Just as it was about to be flung to God knows where, Luo Qingtong reached out her hand and firmly caught it. Shwa. Luo Qingtong's body somersaulted in midair and then stabilized. The surroundings had already changed. Clearly, she had already left the teleportation space. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong's eyes suddenly flashed. She lowered her head, and under the cover of her spinning body, she raised her hand to wipe her face. Very good. Half of it was smooth while the other half was rough. The smooth areas were delicate and tender, while the rough areas were hard to touch. One could even vaguely feel the rough surface of the skin. Clearly, Xiao Tuanzi's power had been successfully unleashed. Luo Qingtong's current appearance was her appearance from her previous life. That rough area should be where the birthmark was. After confirming that her appearance had changed greatly, and that her original appearance should be unrecognizable, Luo Qingtong's heart calmed down. She casually touched her sleeve and found that Little Furball had fainted after unleashing its power. She immediately covered her sleeve and then raised her head to look at the surroundings. This place is... She put on an ignorant expression and pretended that she didn't know anything. She wanted to think of a way to get away with it. Chapter 2269. Then a ghost-like wailing sound rang out. Ah! Good disciple, I finally found you. Disciple, save me. As this voice rang out, Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed and her body, which was about to dodge, froze. This voice, this tone of voice, Song Cheng? Luo Qingtong looked at the figure flying towards her. Who else could it be but Song Cheng, the teacher of the Empire of Qin branch in the Tianyu Empire? It was actually him who summoned her here? Damn. Luo Qingtong's heart was full of curses. She was scared to death. She had been thinking for a long time in the transmission space about how to escape from the evil hands of the immortal Slayer Palace's enemy, but it turned out to be a false alarm. Simply. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. She didn't expect it to be Song Cheng. He had left a letter for her, saying that he had something to do and had left. But there was no news from him. Who would have thought that he would suddenly appear at this time? And he even used such a method to summon her here. It would be strange if she thought it was him. Damn. Luo Qingtong's mood was up and down. It was simply too exciting. When Song Cheng rushed in front of Luo Qingtong, he saw her face covered by a birthmark. He couldn't see her original face at all. In an instant he flashed to the other side. You. Who are you? Song Cheng stared at the girl in front of him who had no strength or aura and had a large birthmark on her face. The shock in his heart was simply indescribable. Why are you here? He raised his hand and pointed at Luo Qingtong. He was flustered and exasperated. Where is my good disciple? He clearly used something with Luo Qingtong's aura to summon her here. Why wasn't it Luo Qingtong who appeared here? Who was this girl? Song Cheng did not recognize that the girl in front of him was Luo Qingtong. After all, the birthmark on Luo Qingtong's face couldn't be any more real. He would never have thought that this unfamiliar girl with a large birthmark in front of him was Luo Qingtong. When the latter heard his words, he felt a wave of annoyance in his heart. Obedient disciple, your sister. I've never seen a master who cheats his disciple like you. She was almost scared to death just now. However, the situation was still unclear. Luo Qingtong was not ready to acknowledge Song Cheng. She glanced around and found that there was a group of people around. At this moment, seeing that Luo Qingtong had been summoned by Song Cheng and that the latter had obviously found the wrong person, a tall and skinny middle-aged man in the crowd laughed. Ah. Song City, the heavens really don't bless your heavenly wind inscription city. I gave you such a good opportunity to gather the strength that your heavenly wind inscription city had accumulated for so many years to activate the interstellar domain teleportation array and summon someone with the power of inscription patterns. You actually summoned the wrong person. What a joke. As he spoke, he laughed loudly. That's right. The group of people behind him laughed as well. A man looked at Luo Qingtong behind Song Cheng and laughed. I don't think he summoned the wrong person. His gaze was filled with contempt. Luo Qingtong did not have any aura of strength around her, let alone knowing inscription patterns. Song Cheng, that fool, must have been so anxious that he thought of using such a method to stall for time. He said that his disciple was a genius and would definitely be able to beat them in inscription patterns. Chapter 2270. Who doesn't know that Song Cheng's inscription technique is terrible to the extreme? He can't even enter the entry level. His existence is the biggest joke in the entire Heavenly Wind Inscription City. For his disciple to be able to win against them in inscription technique is even more of a joke than the heavens. This inscription man-seeking array has never made a mistake, let alone gathering all the energy stored in Heavenly Wind Inscription City. From what I see, he's deliberately stalling for time. He wants to borrow the 3 days of activation of the array to delay the deadline for Heavenly Wind Inscription City to hand over the inscription tower. However, the man looked at Song Cheng and Luo Qingtong and laughed in disdain. Trash will always be trash, sooner or later they'll show their true colors. Song Cheng, you can't delay any longer, so you purposely said that you summoned the wrong person, right? What? You want to do it again? Unfortunately, even if you want to play a joke for us to see, the people of Lingyu Inscription City won't bother to continue tormenting you. Just wait for the inscription tower to change owners tomorrow. The man said as he looked at the tall and thin man beside him and said, City Lord, don't you agree? The City Lord of Lingyu Inscription City immediately nodded and said, That's right. Song Cheng, you're not afraid of losing face and want to play a monkey trick for us, but the people of Lingyu Inscription City aren't willing to see it. The inscription tower has stayed in your Heavenly Wind Inscription City for long enough. If it wasn't for the bet you made with us to learn the inscription technique within 12 years, we would have let the inscription tower stay in your Heavenly Wind Inscription City for another 3 years. The inscription tower would have long been in our Lingyu Inscription City. Now, no matter how many impossible conditions and requests you make, we will definitely not agree to it. Speaking until here, the City Lord of Lingyu Inscription City had a gloomy expression. It was because they were certain that Song Cheng, who had zero inscription talent, would not be able to learn the inscription technique, so they made a bet with him with the inscription tower. In the end, Song Cheng, this trash, actually learned the inscription technique within 12 years. Although he was trash, he was still a proper inscription master. Therefore, they had no choice but to place the inscription tower in Heavenly Wind Inscription City for another 3 years. During these 3 years, they couldn't challenge Skywind Inscription City, nor could they take the inscription tower away. Because of this, he almost lost his position as the city lord. At this moment, when they heard that Song Cheng had decided to call his disciple over to help, everyone from Lengyu Inscription City came over to watch the show. They wanted to see what kind of trick Song Cheng could play and what kind of deity he could summon. In the end, he called out such an ugly girl. What's more, he's a trash with trash strength. The group of people from Lengyu City felt disdain in their hearts. They were certain that this was another trap set by Song Cheng. He wanted them to wait for him to summon them again. What kind of joke was this? Did he think they were fools? This time, the interstellar domain teleportation array had already used up all the power that Heavenly Wind Inscription City had accumulated over the years. If he wanted to activate the interstellar domain teleportation array again and use the inscription technique to search for someone, he had no idea how long he would have to wait. Unless there was something wrong with their brains, they wouldn't let him do it again. Chapter 2271. Behind him, Song Cheng hurriedly shouted, "Hey, wait! City Lord Zhang, please wait. I really summoned the wrong person. Give me another chance. Just one chance." However, when the people of Lengyu City heard his words, they were even more certain that he was deliberately stalling for time. They simply ignored him. In an instant, the crowd had all left. As for the people of Heavenly Wind Inscription City, they looked at Song Cheng and sighed. "Forget it, Cheng, you've already tried your best." An old man who was supported by others walked out at this time. He coughed and said to Song Cheng, "Master." Seeing the old man walk out from the crowd, Song Cheng's eyes turned red. This old man was none other than his master, the city lord of Heavenly Wind Inscription City. The old man believed in education without discrimination. As long as someone wanted to learn inscription techniques, he would teach them regardless of their talent. Song Cheng had been his disciple for dozens of years, but he had never learned inscription techniques. Others mocked him and told the old man to stop teaching him and kick him out to avoid tarnishing the old man's reputation. But the old man had never done that. The old man treated him like a teacher and a father. That was why when Heavenly Wind Inscription City was in danger, Song Cheng stood up without hesitation and used 12 years as a bet, desperately wanting to learn inscription techniques. He heard that returning to his true self was the easiest way to gain enlightenment. That was why he sealed his strength and returned to his hometown, the True Spill continent. In the Qianhu Empire, where he was born, he became a small mentor, hoping that he could gain enlightenment and comprehend inscription techniques. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not succeed. Just when he was disheartened and prepared to stay for another year and return to Inscription City to live and die with Heavenly Wind, he met that weirdo Luo Qingtong. The young girl said that she wanted to learn inscription techniques from him, but Song Cheng did not take it seriously. However, who would have thought that such a young girl would reveal such a peerless talent in inscription techniques? Song Cheng was restricted by the bet, so he could not tell Luo Qingtong his identity. Even the inscription technique that was taught to him was something that he had accidentally obtained. However, who would have thought that under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong would be able to deduce many things from one instance. Not only did she learn the inscription technique, she even taught him. If this matter was spread out, it would probably cause others to roar with laughter. No one would believe it at all. In this world, how could a student teach a teacher? However, Luo Qingtong did it. Hence, Song Cheng had no choice but to think of Luo Qingtong for the crisis in Skywind Inscription City. Because he was afraid that Luo Qingtong's strength was not enough, traveling through the star field would damage her body. He had purposely convinced his master and the people of Skywind Inscription City to allow him to use the power that Skywind Inscription City had stored for so many years to summon Luo Qingtong. Who would have thought that he would summon the wrong person? Thinking of this, Song Cheng felt that he was extremely useless. Thinking about the terrifying situation his master and Tianfeng Inscription City would face once the people of Lengyu Inscription City succeeded, Song Cheng could not help but tear up. "Master." He looked at the old man and choked with sobs. Chapter 2272. Uncle, why don't you solve the problem on my side first? Luo Qingtong looked at the red-eyed Song Cheng and sighed in her heart. She was originally a bit angry that Song Cheng had suddenly summoned her here. After all, Su Yu and Su Xiaoxiao still didn't know anything about the true Spill continent. There was also Yi Qianxian. Thinking of her sudden disappearance, Luo Qingtong frowned. She didn't know how worried and anxious that man would be. But as she saw Song Cheng's red-eyed appearance, she couldn't find the words to blame him. She was well aware of Song Cheng's personality. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, he wouldn't have used such a method to summon her here. Listening to the words of those people, this place seemed to be called Heavenly Wind Inscription City. And those people were from Cold Jade Inscription City. Were they fighting over something called the Inscription Tower? Was it because of this that Song Cheng had specially used an interstellar transmission array to summon her from the true Spill continent? Luo Qingtong wasn't someone who didn't know what was good for her. From the words of the people around her, she could feel that this array formation wasn't easy to use. She feared that Song Cheng's purpose in using this array formation, besides quickly summoning her from the true Spill continent, was to protect her. After all, when Song Cheng left the true Spill continent, she was only a martial king. No matter how much he thought about it, he never imagined that her strength would increase so quickly over the years. She was already a Saint Venerable. In such a situation, if he wanted to bring her to the outer realms without damaging her body and foundation, he could only use a special method. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she couldn't be angry at Song Cheng for suddenly summoning her here. And as her voice sounded out, Song Cheng also remembered that there was a little girl here that he had mistakenly summoned. He had clearly summoned Luo Qingtong, but the result was a little girl that he didn't know at all. Song Cheng's heart felt stifled. He couldn't figure out where the problem came from. Maybe it was just like what the people of Lengyu City said, the heavens didn't bless their heavenly wind inscription city. The old man beside him also coughed and said to him, "That's right, Chenger. You must make sure this young lady is well taken care of. She was summoned here by mistake. She's innocent. As for the matter of heavenly wind inscription city, you don't have to worry about it. Everyone has their own fate. Maybe our heavenly wind inscription city's calamity has arrived." Yes. Song Cheng looked at him and nodded. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. In any case, if he really couldn't do it in the end, he would just live and die with heavenly wind inscription city. Thinking of this, he immediately said to Luo Qingtong, "Come, little girl, come with me." No matter what, he was the one who summoned her, so he had to settle her down. Otherwise he wouldn't feel at ease. However, if she wanted him to send her back to the true Spill continent, that was impossible. Firstly, Song Cheng didn't have that kind of ability. Secondly, the power of Heavenly Wind Inscription City had been exhausted. It was impossible to restart the array formation again. As Song Cheng thought of this, he felt very guilty. He brought Luo Qingtong to his place of residence. Chapter 2273. Don't call me teacher. Although I accidentally summoned you out, I'll make sure you settle down properly. Other than that, there's nothing else. Song Cheng said without turning his head. Although his demonic disciple didn't respect him and was always unwilling to acknowledge him as her teacher, she still had to urge him. However, Song Cheng had already decided that Luo Qingtong was his only disciple. Furthermore, with his inscription skills, what kind of disciple could he teach? It was enough to have his precious disciple. Song Cheng was very suspicious that he had summoned the wrong person this time. Perhaps it was Luo Qingtong's masterpiece. That girl had always been cautious and had many tricks up her sleeve. Perhaps she had tampered with the inscription tool and changed the aura inside. That was why his inscription manhunting array had gone wrong. When he thought of this, Song Cheng couldn't help but feel proud. That was his disciple. She was peerless and unique in the world. Although she was too smart and he would be cheated for no reason. However, he was happy to do so. So what if he was happy to pamper his disciple? He didn't want anyone else, no matter how many came. No. He waved his hand as he spoke. When his voice sounded, Luo Qingtong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Master, it's me." Luo Qingtong rolled her eyes. She knew that he had misunderstood and thought that she wanted to acknowledge him as her master. "I'm Qingtong." When Luo Qingtong spoke, Song Cheng suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Qingtong?" Song Cheng suddenly turned around and looked at Luo Qingtong as if he had seen a ghost. No matter how he looked at her, the person in front of him didn't look like Luo Qingtong. His precious disciple was born beautiful and beautiful. How could she be so ugly? She even had such a huge birthmark on her face. "Don't lie to me." Song Cheng looked at Luo Qingtong with a serious expression. His gaze towards the young girl was extremely cold. Although he had summoned the wrong person, he was willing to compensate her. However, this wasn't a reason for her to lie to him. She wanted to pretend to be his disciple and reap benefits? She had the wrong idea. Luo Qingtong looked at him speechlessly. Do you want me to tell you about how you couldn't learn the inscription technique no matter how hard you tried? You treat a 10 square meter space inscription pattern array as a treasure you. Before Luo Qingtong could finish her words, Song Qing pounced on her and covered her mouth. Wait. Song Qing looked at the ugly girl in front of him and asked, where did we first meet? In the dormitory of Tianyu Academy. Right? Luo Qingtong looked at him and said with a smile, someone said that he would accept a disciple on behalf of a friend, but in the end, he didn't mention it at all. Since you don't recognize me as your disciple, why don't you introduce me to your old friend? I don't mind changing my master. I mind. Song Qing was now completely convinced that Luo Qingtong was his disciple. He looked at the young girl in front of him, feeling both puzzled and excited. You stinky girl. It's really you? How did you become like this? Also, why didn't you recognize me when you just came out? You made me so anxious. Song Qing's voice was trembling. His heart was on a roller coaster ride. It was simply too exciting. This stinky girl played him like this. Chapter 2274. You still have the nerve to say that. Luo Qingtong rolled her eyes at him. Why did you summon me here so casually? Who knows what's going on? I thought it was my enemy. Luo Qingtong said with narrowed eyes. She had the inheritance of the immortal Slayer Palace, and she didn't know what was going on here. Naturally, she had to be careful. After all, this was the outer realm and not a small place like the True Spill continent. What if she accidentally exposed herself and attracted the enemies of the immortal Slayer Palace? Not to mention this was a place related to inscription patterns. The immortal Slayer Palace used to be the leader of inscription patterns, the #1 sect. Maybe the forces here were related to the former enemies of the immortal Slayer Palace. How could Luo Qingtong be careless? Song Qing thought about it. This time he summoned Luo Qingtong here, and it was indeed too sudden. No wonder this girl hid it from him and didn't want to acknowledge him. Seeing Luo Qingtong's face change, Song Qing's lips twitched. He felt a little guilty in his heart. At that time he only thought of the benefits of the interstellar transmission array, but he didn't expect that Luo Qingtong didn't know anything and was teleported here. It was already good enough that she wasn't scared to death. Cough. As he thought about it, he suddenly felt that he was not in the right. This master didn't consider it so clearly. But I really didn't mean it. My dear disciple. You have to believe me. Song Qing looked pitiful. He was afraid that Luo Qingtong would be unhappy and really replace him as her master. At that time, where could he find such a good disciple? No way. He begged for this disciple shamelessly, and he didn't want her even if he died. Okay, I know. Luo Qingtong looked at him with a burst of annoyance. If not for this, she would have ignored Song Qing long ago. Why would she acknowledge him? Who was sincere and who was insincere, who had the intention and who didn't, she couldn't tell. That's good, that's good. Song Qing patted his chest and rejoiced. But very quickly, he thought of the reason why he called Luo Qingtong over, and immediately said with a sad face, My precious disciple, you have to help me this time. Your master I was bullied so badly. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched as she looked at him. He had never seen someone who could ask his disciple to help him so smoothly. She had to hand it to this master of hers. Let's go back to your place first, Luo Qingtong said. She also wanted to understand where she was and how to return to True Spill continent. She had given up on the interstellar domain teleportation array. The words of those people were very clear. Using the teleportation array had almost exhausted all of the power of the Heavenly Wind Inscription City. It was almost impossible to send her back again. Moreover, if the reverse teleportation array was so simple, Song Qing would not have only summoned him here and not gone over himself. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong and Song Qing immediately returned to his place. Soon she learned the basic situation of this place from the other party. The place she was at was indeed Heavenly Wind Inscription City. Inscription City was specially built by the Inscription Masters Association as a place for inscription masters to communicate and live. It was independent of the major star fields and was not threatened by any powerhouses. Every star field of 6 stars and above had an inscription city. Chapter 2275. As Luo Qingtong heard this, she looked at Song Qing with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, So master is from the Heavenly Wind region. Sorry for the disrespect. She used to think that Song Qing was someone from the True Spill continent who was lucky enough to discover the inscription pattern technique. Although she found it strange that his analysis of the inscription pattern technique was so simple, she thought that it was because Song Cheng accidentally came into contact with the inscription pattern technique. He didn't understand the theory behind it, so he studied it repeatedly. That was why he had such an understanding. In the end, he was someone from the Heavenly Wind Inscription City. How could he not know what the inscription pattern technique was when he was from the inscription pattern city? He might even have memorized the low-level entry-level techniques by heart. That was why he was able to analyze those theories so thoroughly with a body that had zero talent. Damn it. Luo Qingtong put on a fake smile, but Song Cheng felt a chill run down his spine. Without thinking, he pounced on Luo Qingtong and howled. Disciple. Master, I was forced to do this. At that time, I made a bet with the people of Cold Jade Inscription City. 12 years. That is, if I could learn the inscription pattern technique, then they would not be able to challenge Heavenly Wind Inscription City and take away the inscription pattern tower. At that time, the content of the bet was that no inscription master was allowed to help me. If I went out to seek a breakthrough, I could not reveal my identity to the outside world. I could not reveal the matter of Heavenly Wind Inscription City and Cold Jade Inscription City to seek help from others. That's why Master hid it from you and did not tell you my identity. Even my cultivation, because it was related to my identity as a foreigner, that's why the seal could not be lifted. Song Cheng was just short of clinging onto Luo Qingtong and bawling his eyes out. Seeing him like this, Luo Qingtong tugged at the corner of her lips. Alright, I was just casually saying it. Luo Qingtong also admired this master of hers. He didn't have any integrity at all. What happened to the dignity of a master? However, ever since the other party shamelessly insisted on being her master, he had lost all sense of shame. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched even more as she thought about it. That's enough. Seeing that Song Cheng was about to continue howling, Luo Qingtong held her forehead and hurriedly stopped him. She said, Hurry and sit down. Master, I still have something to ask you. As soon as Luo Qingtong's words came out, Song Cheng immediately sat upright and still, looking like a filial master. He asked Luo Qingtong, Disciple, if you have something to ask, feel free to ask. Master, I will definitely tell you everything I know. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched, then she asked him, Since you've successfully learned the inscription technique, logically speaking, they shouldn't be able to challenge Heavenly Wind Inscription City. Why are they here now? And that inscription tower, what exactly is it? The moment Luo Qingtong's words left her mouth, Song Cheng's serious expression instantly collapsed. Don't mention it. His face was gloomy as he said angrily, Those bastards from Cold Jade Inscription City, we agreed that if I successfully learned the inscription technique, they wouldn't be able to challenge Heavenly Wind Inscription City and take away the inscription tower. Chapter 2276. Saying this is already giving us a lot of face. And these 3 years were exchanged by my master, the city lord of Sky Wind Inscription City, using his own inscription master skills. As Song Cheng spoke, there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. He looked at Luo Qingtong and his lips twitched. Then he felt very dejected in his heart. He said in a low voice, Qingtong, am I very useless? You are my disciple, and I was the one who shamelessly begged you. I know, with my inscription talent, let alone being your master, I might not even be qualified to be your disciple. I'm really sorry for suddenly calling you here. But, as Song Cheng spoke, he sighed heavily and said, I really have no other way. Master's kindness to me is as heavy as a mountain. In Skywind Inscription City, I am the most disappointing one. No matter how hard I try, I can't learn the inscription technique that Master taught me. I'm completely different from you. You can infer many things from one example. However, Master has never turned his back on me. As Song Cheng spoke, he bitterly smiled. He looked at Luo Qingtong and said, Qingtong, I know that rather than saying that I brought you in, it's better to say that you comprehended it on your own. Your talent is peerless and rare. In Skywind Inscription City, I don't know how many inscription geniuses I've heard of. I've even heard of some of the top geniuses of the Central Union, but none of them can compare to you. No one can be like you, in an environment like the True Spill continent, and still be able to comprehend it on your own and cultivate to a high-level inscription master. Qingtong, your future is limitless. In the past, even if you didn't have my guidance with your talent and ability, you wouldn't have stopped at the entrance. You would have just entered a little later. As Song Cheng spoke, he sighed. He looked seriously at Luo Qingtong and said, But even so, I still want to shamelessly ask you for help. Qingtong, please help me. I can't watch the people of Cold Jade Inscription City take away the Inscription Tower. I don't want Sky Wind Inscription City to be forced to disband, and I don't want Master to lose the inscription technique that he was so proud of. From now on, he will never be able to inscribe inscriptions again. As Song Qing spoke, his eyes were already filled with tears. At this moment, there was no trace of the mischievous smile on his face when he was joking around in front of Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong frowned and said, "How do you know that I can help you? Your Heavenly Wind Inscription City has so many inscription masters, and I'm sure you don't lack high-level inscription masters as well. Furthermore, they are more powerful than me. If they can't do anything, how do you know I can?" Luo Qingtong couldn't understand why Song Cheng would think that she could take back the inscription tower for Heavenly Wind Inscription City. To be able to cause their Heavenly Wind Inscription City to be at a loss, the other party's inscription skills must be extremely powerful, definitely above a high-level inscription master. How long had she been learning inscription techniques? Even if Luo Qingtong was confident that she could learn most of the inscriptions with her pair of blood eyes, Luo Qingtong was confident that she could learn most of the inscriptions. But to be able to learn and to be able to use were two different things. Otherwise, why would Luo Qingtong learn inscription techniques from the beginning? It was because in order to use inscription techniques, not only did one need to know how to inscribe inscription marks, one also needed to have the right amount of energy. Chapter 2277. Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes could only help her decipher the inscription mark as quickly as possible. She didn't need to spend too much time comprehending and analyzing it. As for the specific usage and power infusion, she still needed to explore and cultivate by herself. It was just like how she cultivated to increase her strength. Therefore, Luo Qingtong couldn't figure out how Song Cheng was so sure that she could help him. He didn't hesitate to use the inscription pattern searching technique to summon her from the true Spill continent. Of course, it's because of your super strong comprehension ability. Song Cheng looked at Luo Qingtong and said, "You little girl, you probably don't know how terrifying your inscription talent is, right? I've never seen someone like you. When you were just a beginner in the inscription pattern technique, you were already able to guide me to a higher level of inscription pattern technique. Do you know what this means? It means that your comprehension ability has long surpassed your own inscription pattern level. It's only because your strength isn't enough that you can't use it. But do you know?" Song Cheng looked at Luo Qingtong with a burning gaze. The challenge in the inscription tower is to create a seal through space. Song Cheng said to Luo Qingtong, "You might not understand if I put it that way. I'll explain it to you like this. In other words, in the inscription tower, as long as you have enough comprehension of the inscription pattern technique, you don't need to inject your own strength. You can guide the power of the inscription tower into it and create a seal directly. In other words, the battle in the inscription tower doesn't rely on your own strength, but on your own comprehension. Even if you don't have any strength at the moment, as long as you have a deep enough understanding of the inscription pattern technique, you can use it in the inscription tower. As long as it's an inscription mark that you understand, you can use the power of the inscription tower to manifest and inscribe it. In that case, can you understand?" Song Cheng's words resounded. In an instant, Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up. "You're saying that as long as I can completely comprehend the inscription mark, I can use it in the inscription tower even if I don't have enough strength? So powerful? This inscription pagoda is a rare treasure." However, this was only limited to inscriptionists. Luo Qingtong finally understood why the people of Cold Jade Inscription City wanted this inscription tower so badly. "Yes." Song Qing nodded his head and said proudly, "The inscription tower was given to our inscription city by the Central Inscription Union. It was the result of the combined efforts of my master and all the ancestors of Heavenly Wind Inscription City. Among all the inscription cities in the 6-star region, only our Sky Wind Inscription City has such an inscription tower. This inscription tower can increase the strength of us inscription masters, allowing us to practice the inscription technique without any restraint. We don't need to waste any of our strength. It's extremely beneficial for us to consolidate our strength and break through bottlenecks. Not only that, I heard that the inscription tower has battle inscription marks left behind by inscription masters of the Central Union. If we can obtain them, we can directly inject energy into them and activate them. Even if it's the lowest level of the inscription of battle, it's equivalent to the strength of a warrior at the 9th level of the human martial realm. It can't be underestimated." Chapter 2278. Human Martial Realm? This was a new name. Luo Qingtong felt that ever since she left the true Spill continent, she had realized just how vast the world was. It was far beyond her imagination. But this was also what she wanted. If it was like the 24th century on Earth, she wouldn't be able to find any opponents. Then what was the point? But now it was more interesting. As Luo Qingtong thought this, her lips curved up in a smile. It was indescribably evil. Human martial realm. As Song Cheng heard Luo Qingtong ask about this, he simply explained it to her. In any case, she was already in the outer realms. Sooner or later she would learn about this. And the earlier she knew, the better it would be for her future motivation. It's like this. The hidden world of your true spill continent is the gateway to your true spill continent. The powerhouses there are between the Saint Realm and Saint Realm. As Song Cheng spoke, he wanted to tell Luo Qingtong about the division of strength between the Saint Realm and above. However, before he could speak, Luo Qingtong nodded and said, I know. I'm already at the Saint Realm. As Song Cheng spoke, he was thirsty. After all, he had just spoken so much with Luo Qingtong. He was about to take a sip of tea. However, just as he poured himself a cup of tea and was about to continue speaking, he heard Luo Qingtong suddenly say this. He spat out all of the tea in his mouth. Luo Qingtong quickly dodged, but Song Cheng was the one who sprayed himself with tea. However, he didn't care about this. He pulled Luo Qingtong aside and said with wide eyes, "What did you say? What cultivation are you at?" Song Cheng thought that he had misheard. His own disciple should have said the Saint Realm. Although rising to the Saint Realm in such a short period of time was truly extraordinary, as he thought of Luo Qingtong's monstrous talent and ability, he was somewhat relieved. However, Luo Qingtong's next words completely shattered his guesses. Saint Realm. Luo Qingtong faintly said. Oh, that's not right. You should be at the 9th realm of the Saint Realm. As Luo Qingtong said this, Song Cheng was clutching his chest as if he had a heart attack. As he heard Luo Qingtong's words, he calmed down a little. It was impossible. In just a few years she had been in the true Spill continent, an inferior and barren continent. How could Luo Qingtong possibly be? Just as he thought of this, Luo Qingtong's last sentence rang out. Instantly he felt unwell. 9th realm. 9th realm. Song Cheng clutched his chest and stared at Luo Qingtong with widened eyes. Not only was she at the Saint Realm, but she was at the 9th realm? What kind of tonic did this girl take? In just a few short years, his strength had actually soared to such an extent. Song Cheng couldn't believe his own ears. He looked up and down at Luo Qingtong. Although he knew that if he questioned her then it would easily anger his precious disciple, he still couldn't help himself. No, I must say, my disciple, your strength doesn't seem right? Song Cheng looked at Luo Qingtong in a daze. It was only now that he realized that there weren't any fluctuations of strength coming from Luo Qingtong's body. At first, he thought that he had summoned the wrong person. Then he thought that it was because Luo Qingtong's strength was too low so he couldn't sense it. Chapter 2279. Not to mention that she was a 9th realm Saint Venerable, she was almost the same as an ordinary person, alright? What was going on? There was an accident. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. It was a long story so she did not want to tell Song Cheng too much. You will recover very soon. Luo Qingtong's strength was only temporarily gone. As long as she found a way to draw energy into her body again, she would be able to nurture a trace of strength in her body again. By then, she would be able to use her cultivation technique to recover her strength. Hence, she did not feel too burdened when she said it. When Song Cheng heard her words, he was so stifled that he almost could not breathe. He was doubting her strength. His precious disciple dismissed him with a simple accident. But then again, what kind of accident could cause Luo Qingtong to lose all her strength? She looked like an ordinary person? If not, he would not have directly confirmed that he had summoned the wrong person. After all, Luo Qingtong's face was full of birthmarks and her weak body. It was hard for Song Cheng not to believe it. However, Song Cheng felt that Luo Qingtong would not lie to him, and she would not purposely say that her strength was high for the sake of grandiose achievements. So it was true? This girl had really advanced to the 9th realm Saint Venerable? Was it because of this strength that the strength in her body disappeared? After all, it was reasonable for there to be some side effects after suddenly increasing her strength to such a high level. Song Cheng thought so and accepted Luo Qingtong's explanation. He sighed in his heart. His precious disciple was indeed different. If other disciples did not see each other for 3 years, they might think that the other person's cultivation had regressed or that their strength had not increased at all. His precious disciple, on the other hand, had directly jumped 30 feet high. The speed of her strength increase was like sitting on a rocket. It was simply frightening. Song Ching said and immediately drank another mouthful of tea to calm himself down. Then he asked Luo Qingtong, "Are you really okay? Don't force yourself. Tell me directly if you need anything. I can still get many good things in this inscription city." Song Ching patted his chest and said, "All right." Luo Qingtong looked at him and said with a smile, "When I need your help, I will definitely look for you, master." Luo Qingtong smiled sweetly. She didn't need anything but in the true Spill continent Su Yu Old Man Luo and Su Xiaoxiao did. Since Song Cheng had spoken, Luo Qingtong naturally wouldn't be polite with him. Song Cheng still didn't know how serious the consequences of his careless words were. Now that he heard Luo Qingtong agree, his vanity as a master was greatly satisfied. He finally had a sense of being a master. He thought to himself happily. This precious disciple of his was really too powerful. Every time, it made him feel that this master of his was super useless. Now he could finally do something for her. Thinking so, Song Ching immediately agreed. Then he continued to introduce the next division of strength to Luo Qingtong. Since you are already a Saint Venerable, you should know the division of strength above the Saint Venerable realm, right? Seeing Luo Qingtong nod, he immediately continued, "The human martial realm I want to talk about is the realm of strength after breaking through to the Saint Venerable realm. In the world there are 3 great martial realms: heaven, earth and human. The human martial realm is the lowest, the earth martial realm is second, and the sky martial realm is the highest. Each realm is divided into 9 stages. And it is said that above the sky martial realm, there are even higher realms." Chapter 2280. As Song Ching spoke, there was a tinge of regret in his tone. With his aptitude, it would be lucky if he could reach level 9 of the human martial realm. He didn't dare to hope for a higher realm. "So, little girl, do you know what the battle inscription that represents the peak of the human martial realm represents?" Battle inscriptions can only be carved by inscriptionists who have reached the human martial realm. The stronger the inscriptionist, the more powerful the battle inscription. At that time, the inscriptionist can look down on all enemies of the same level. However, there are too few people who can balance inscriptions and cultivation. And not everyone has the talent for inscriptions. Therefore, such inscriptionists are extremely rare. They are all in the Central Union. Song Cheng's words made Luo Qingtong's eyes light up. A battle inscription that was comparable to the peak of the human martial realm. Although it could only be used once, it was definitely a great weapon. Everything else aside, Luo Qingtong had a golden ticket to avoid death in the 6-star region and below. Since there was a chance for such a good thing, she must get it. Moreover, Luo Qingtong couldn't ignore Song Cheng. Although the other party had shamelessly begged her to be his disciple, his heart was sincere. Otherwise, with Luo Qingtong's temperament, if she didn't want to acknowledge him as her master, what was the use of Song Cheng's shamelessness? For Luo Qingtong, if she didn't want to do something, no one could force her. However, if she wanted to protect someone, she would go even if it was a mountain of swords and a sea of fire. "I'm going to the inscription tower. Are they going to do it tomorrow?" Luo Qingtong looked at Song Cheng. "Yes. They have been delaying it for 3 years. I'm afraid they can't wait." When the people of Lengyu Inscription City were mentioned, Song Cheng was annoyed. Those people were too cunning. If they hadn't broken the bet, he wouldn't have used this method to call Luo Qingtong over. God knows how much he was afraid that Luo Qingtong would be angry and abandon him as her master. "All right." Luo Qingtong nodded and said, "Then we will go and meet them tomorrow. But before that, master, I have something to tell you. Your disciple Luo Qingtong hasn't come yet. You summoned the wrong person." As Luo Qingtong said this, Song Cheng suddenly let out an ah sound. He didn't know what Luo Qingtong meant. However, before he could ask, Luo Qingtong had already pressed his hand down. "Master, didn't I tell you before? I have enemies in the outer realms. This matter is too complicated, so I won't tell you more about it." Luo Qingtong had always been cautious. She had the inheritance of the Immortal Slayer Palace, and now she was going to use her inscription technique to fight against the people of Lengyu Inscription City. Once he won, his reputation would immediately spread. Luo Qingtong didn't want to attract any unnecessary trouble. She would help Song Cheng, but not with the identity of Luo Qingtong, but with another identity. At that time, I will have to trouble Master to accept another disciple. Luo Qingtong said with a smile as she looked at Song Cheng. When the latter heard this, he immediately understood. He immediately laughed happily and said, "Okay. As long as it is my precious disciple, I will accept as many as you come." In any case, he would only accept his precious disciple. Song Qing naturally wouldn't disagree. All right. Luo Qingtong looked at him and smiled. Then master, quickly prepare an identity for me. Chapter 2281. Sigh. Song Qing hurriedly agreed and then hurriedly went out to prepare. He didn't dare to neglect what his precious disciple wanted to do. Furthermore, Luo Qingtong had already agreed to help him, which made Song Qing even more ecstatic. Others might think that it was ridiculous for him to place his hopes on a disciple, but Song Qing knew that with Luo Qingtong's peerless talent, if there was really someone who could help Tianfeng Inscription City turn the tide, it would only be her. If Luo Qingtong couldn't do it, then Tianfeng Inscription City wouldn't be able to escape this calamity. As he thought about it, he immediately went to prepare. And at this moment, in a luxurious courtyard, the group of people who had left Lengyu Inscription City earlier walked in. After the city lord of Lengyu Inscription City let the others return to their rooms to rest, he immediately brought a few of his trusted aides to a room. Master Qin, he said respectfully to an old man in the room with a flattering expression, we can take back the inscription tower tomorrow. Thank you, Master Qin, for helping our Lengyu Inscription City. Otherwise, our Lengyu Inscription City wouldn't have been able to take the inscription tower from Tianfeng Inscription City. As the city lord of Lengyu Inscription City said this, he was extremely proud in his heart. Their Lengyu Inscription City's strength had always been below Tianfeng Inscription City, especially himself. He was absolutely no match for the city lord of Tianfeng Inscription City. The other party's strength was tyrannical and his inscription ability was first-rate. It was said that he could break through the level of an advanced rank 9 inscription master at any time and enter the level of a spirit seal master. At that time, he would be able to condense his natal inscription mark and have the qualifications to cultivate battle inscriptions. Of course, it wasn't that easy to cultivate battle inscriptions. He still had to raise his strength to the human martial realm or above. Even so, the other party's inscription ability completely crushed him. This inscription tower had been in Tianfeng Inscription City for who knows how many years, but no one had ever succeeded in seizing it. However, there was someone helping them in Lengyu Inscription City. Thinking about it, the city lord of Lengyu Inscription City felt even more proud. He looked at the old man opposite him. This Master Qin suddenly appeared in their Lengyu Inscription City and said that he would help them seize the inscription tower in Tianfeng Inscription City. At that time, City Lord Lengyuan thought that he was joking. However, the latter had really defeated the Heavenly Wind City's city lord in the inscription tower's battle. If it wasn't for the latter destroying the inscription mark that he was about to successfully condense and temporarily increasing his comprehension of inscriptions, they would have already won. However, because the Heavenly Wind Inscription City Lord destroyed his own inscription mark, he was basically crippled. Even if his inscription ability was still there, what was the use if he couldn't use it? This time the inscription tower would definitely be theirs. Thinking about this, the city lord of Lengyu Inscription City had a complacent expression on his face, and he was full of joy. Master Qin looked up at him and snorted, "Are you sure? There won't be any changes? For example, another bet or something?" Hearing this, Lengyu's face immediately darkened. When he thought of the bet he had agreed to with Song Qing in a moment of stupidity, he felt a heart attack. Chapter 2282. Who would have thought that the joke in Tianfeng Inscription City, who had no talent in inscriptions, would actually be able to learn inscription techniques within 12 years. He had clearly stayed in Tianfeng Inscription City for so many years, but he still hadn't learned it. Even if someone like the Tianfeng Inscription City Lord personally taught him, he still couldn't do it. The so-called rotten wood can't be carved, was probably referring to Song City. In the end, after signing the bet with him, he went out to seek a breakthrough. In the end, he actually succeeded. Simply Motherf asterisk her. Lengyu Inscription City Lord felt a wave of depression in his heart. Then he hurriedly said to the old man, "Master Chen, don't worry. There definitely won't be any problems this time." If it wasn't for the fact that he was afraid that Song City would cause trouble again, he wouldn't have even gone to look when the people of Tianfeng Inscription City set up some inscription man-seeking array. However, the final result was just as he had expected. It was just a trick to scare people and stall for time. It was obvious that the people of Tianfeng Inscription City had already run out of ideas and had no other choice. "I guarantee that the inscription tower will be ours tomorrow. And the battle inscription mark at the peak of the human martial realm that you want will definitely be yours," Lengyu Inscription City Lord said with a flattering expression. When this Master Qin came to help them, he had pointed out that he wanted the battle inscription mark. Since Lung Yu Inscription City Lord could obtain the inscription tower, he naturally wouldn't refuse. After all, no matter how precious the battle inscription was, it couldn't be more precious than the inscription tower. However, he actually couldn't figure out why the other party didn't directly go to Tianfeng Inscription City to request to join and then directly enter the inscription tower to seize the inscription mark. After all, the people of Tianfeng Inscription City didn't stop the people of Inscription City from entering to seize the inscription mark. The city lord of Tianfeng Inscription City even advocated for the capable. As long as the other party had the ability to take away the battle inscription mark, the people of Tianfeng Inscription City definitely wouldn't stop him. Lung Yu Inscription City Lord felt that it was strange. However, when he thought about how powerful the other party was and how mysterious his background was, he probably didn't want to join Tianfeng Inscription City. After all, he had invited the other party to join their Lung Yu Inscription City many times, but the other party had rejected him. As he thought about it, he didn't think about it anymore. However, Lung Yu Inscription City Lord didn't know that as he spoke, a strange light flashed in the depths of Master Chen's eyes. Battle inscription at the peak of the human martial arts realm. That kind of trash was not his target. His target was something else hidden in the inscription tower. If he hadn't been lucky enough to know the whereabouts of that item, how could a heaven-grade spirit seal master appear in such a small 6-star domain? Why would he fight for the inscription tower for such a lousy inscription city? If it wasn't for him being afraid of exposing himself too much and attracting unnecessary trouble, he would have been able to defeat the city lord of Heaven Wind Inscription City with a flick of his finger. How could he have given the city lord of Heaven Wind Inscription City the chance to make a comeback at the last moment? With that thought in mind, Master Chen snorted. Losing to someone who hadn't completely condensed his inscription mark was the greatest humiliation of his life. Fortunately, no one here knew of his identity. Once he obtained that item, he would immediately leave this place. As for the people of Heavenly Wind Inscription City, they naturally had to pay the price for this humiliation. Chapter 2283. As Master Chen thought about it, he waved his hand and asked Leng Yu and the others to leave his room. On the other side, after Luo Qingtong asked Song Qing to prepare an identity for her, she also asked him to prepare a residence for her in Tianfeng Inscription City. She asked Song Qing to send the items to her residence after he finished preparing her identity and documents. Luo Qingtong put on a veil hat and went out. "Master, where are you going?" Little Pig didn't show up when she was talking to Song Qing earlier. When he saw Luo Qingtong leaving with the veil hat, he immediately poked his head out of Luo Qingtong's bosom and asked curiously, "I'm going to prepare some things." Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She had no strength and her blood eyes were limited. Although Song Qing said that the inscription tower didn't care about strength and only relied on the comprehension of inscriptions, Luo Qingtong liked to plan ahead. Moreover, she didn't know if the power in the tower could support the operation of her blood eyes. Since Luo Qingtong promised Song Qing to help, she would do her best. Moreover, she didn't want any accidents to happen in the inscription tower. That place was a place she wasn't familiar with. Without strength, she didn't feel safe at all. "Oh." Little Pig nodded and then asked, "Then why don't you ask your master to prepare it? Wasn't it the most cost-effective and reliable thing to ask him for the items in Tianfeng Inscription City? It's too troublesome." Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. Of course, she knew that Song Qing was the most convenient. However, he had already prepared an identity for her. Moreover, she wanted to hide her identity and couldn't let Song Qing do everything. Otherwise, if someone were to keep an eye on him, they would be able to find out everything. Luo Qingtong couldn't let others associate her with the girl summoned by Song Qing. Thus, other than having Song Qing take care of her identity, she had to take care of everything else herself. Luo Qingtong put on the veil hat and walked into a pharmacy. She quickly prepared the herbs she needed. The medicinal herbs she concocted were enlightenment spirit pills that could help her draw qi into her body as quickly as possible. This kind of medicinal pill Luo Qingtong used to give a lot of people in the Luo family's Iron Army. She didn't expect that one day she would give it to herself. Originally, according to her inventory in the True Spill continent, there should have been a lot of materials needed to refine the enlightenment spirit pill in her trash ring. However, what Luo Qingtong needed was to be able to fully comprehend the spiritual aura and draw it into her body within a day. After all, tomorrow was the day when the people from Cold Jade Inscription City would come to retrieve the inscription tower. It was obviously unrealistic to ask the people of Cold Jade Inscription City to delay the date of taking away the inscription tower. Luo Qingtong could only work on the effects of the Enlightenment Spirit Pill. In order for the Enlightenment Spirit Pill's effects to be good, the medicinal power of the medicinal herbs needed to be rich and of a high grade. With such conditions, the medicinal herbs in Luo Qingtong's waist ring did not meet the requirements. On the contrary, Sky Wind Inscription City was a city in a 6-star region. Even if the medicinal herbs were of the lowest grade, the medicinal power contained in them could instantly kill the high-grade medicinal herbs in the True Spill continent. Therefore, Luo Qingtong directly went to the pharmacy in Sky Wind Inscription City to purchase. The management of Sky Wind Inscription City was excellent. Luo Qingtong didn't encounter anything bad along the way. The shopkeeper of the pharmacy was also very enthusiastic. Chapter 2284. When Luo Qingtong was about to pay, he waved his hand and said, "Forget it, you're just a little girl. Forget about this bit of medicine money. It's not a big deal." As he spoke, he sighed and said, "Sigh, this Heavenly Wind Inscription City might be disbanded tomorrow. My pharmacy might not be able to continue operating at that time. After all, the other inscription cities don't have a good person like Old City Lord Jianghu. A small shop like ours can only survive in a place like Heavenly Wind Inscription City. If it was any other inscription city, it would have long been swallowed up by those rich and overbearing shops." The shopkeeper of the pharmacy waved his hand and said, "Seeing that it's not easy for a little girl like you, I'll treat it as doing a good deed today. After all, if we can open for one more day, it's one more day." As the shopkeeper of the pharmacy spoke, he sighed heavily. A small shop like theirs couldn't be compared to a big shop. A big shop had an alchemist overseeing it so they could do well wherever they went. However, a small shop like theirs, once they left the place where they grew up and went to another city, it would be very easy for them to be squeezed out of existence by others. Not to mention that the other cities weren't as benevolent as Heavenly Wind Inscription City, with the Heavenly Wind Inscription City Lord protecting them. If they were to go to another place, even if they were to take root, it would be very easy for others to maliciously squeeze and swallow them up. Thus, the shopkeeper of the pharmacy had already made preparations for this to be the last day of business. He looked at Luo Qingtong, who was wearing a veil hat, and waved his hand. "All right, little girl, let's go." Luo Qingtong smiled when she heard this. She didn't insist on paying and only took out something from her trash ring and placed it on the counter. "Uncle, don't worry. Heavenly Wind Inscription City won't fall." She turned around and left. Hearing this, the shopkeeper of the pharmacy was stunned for a moment. Then, he smiled and shook his head as he looked at Luo Qingtong's departing figure. "Little girl, you're too naive." The shopkeeper of the pharmacy didn't take Luo Qingtong's words to heart. The other party probably wasn't from Heavenly Wind Inscription City. Otherwise, he would not know how powerful Cold Jade Inscription City was. The other party should have taken away the Inscription Tower 3 years ago. And Heavenly Wind Inscription City should have been disbanded at that time. "So I hope a miracle." As he spoke, his gaze suddenly landed on the things that Luo Qingtong had placed on the counter. Then he was stunned. This. He looked at a prescription on the counter to be a prescription. On it, the steps to concoct this medicinal liquid were written in detail. From when to add the herbs, when to start the fusion, and what color represented the success of the fusion, all of it was very clear. It could be said that as long as there was this prescription, even an ignorant person would be able to refine the medicinal liquid on the prescription. 2. He knew very well in his heart that even an alchemist who had already become a grandmaster might not be able to take out such a prescription. The shopkeeper of the pharmacy thought with his mouth wide open and hurriedly rushed out. However, at this time, there was no trace of Luo Qingtong on the street. The young girl had already left after leaving the pharmacy. That prescription was just one of the prescriptions that she had casually taken out from the Empire of Qin's Academy of Medicine students. Back then, she had used this method to deal with the students of the Academy of Medicine and had written countless prescriptions. Chapter 2285. After Luo Qingtong went back, she prepared to start refining pills. She set up layers of arrays in her room. After making sure that no one could disturb her while she was refining pills, she took out the square immortal cauldron from her waist ring. This square immortal cauldron had been in Luo Qingtong's waist ring for a long time. With Luo Qingtong's previous alchemy strength, she no longer needed to use the square immortal cauldron to refine pills. However, this time she had no strength and could not open her blood eye. To refine an excellent enlightenment spirit pill without wasting the medicinal power, she naturally needed to use the square immortal cauldron. Only this immortal cauldron could accurately control the furnace fire inside when Luo Qingtong had no strength and refine the medicinal power of the medicinal herbs inside just right. Luo Qingtong placed the medicinal herbs she bought from the pharmacy into the square immortal cauldron and made a seal with her hand. In an instant, the entire pill furnace lit up fiercely. The raging flames inside instantly soared up. There was no need for Luo Qingtong to use any of her strength. According to the steps of refining the Enlightenment Spirit Pill, Luo Qingtong added the medicinal herbs she needed bit by bit. Under her precise control, even without the help of her blood eye, Luo Qingtong still succeeded in refining the Enlightenment Spirit Pill. It was just that the retention rate of the medicinal power was not as good as when Luo Qingtong opened her blood eye, but it was still 90%. Luo Qingtong looked very satisfied. After all, the pills on the market that reached this level were already considered top grade. Above that level, even alchemy grandmasters would not dare to say that they were confident. Of course, if Luo Qingtong opened her blood eye, she would be able to achieve 100% retention rate. In that case, the medicinal effect would be even better. But now, 90% was already very good. It was enough for Luo Qingtong to fully comprehend the spirit qi before tomorrow, draw the spirit qi into her body again and recover her strength. Luo Qingtong took out the Enlightenment Spirit Pill from the square immortal cauldron and swallowed it. Boom. As soon as the medicinal pill entered her body, the medicinal power inside began to circulate throughout Luo Qingtong's limbs and body. As the medicinal effects flowed through Luo Qingtong's body, she sat down cross-legged and carefully sensed the spiritual aura around her. Under the effect of these medicinal herbs, Luo Qingtong's sensitivity to the surrounding spiritual energy greatly increased. The Enlightenment Spirit Pill was used to help martial artists open up their meridians and increase their perception of spirit qi. From there, they would be able to draw spirit qi into their bodies and step onto the path of cultivation. A single Enlightenment Spirit Pill was enough to allow ordinary people to ignore the difference in talent. It allowed those who did not have talent and could not sense the existence of spiritual energy around them to become warriors. As for Luo Qingtong's Enlightenment Spirit Pill, it was an enhanced version of an ordinary Enlightenment Spirit Pill. As soon as this Enlightenment Spirit Pill entered her mouth, the attributes and types of the spirit qi were completely presented in front of Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong circulated the lowest level of martial artist entry-level techniques and slowly drew the spirit qi that was suitable for martial artists to cultivate into her body. As for the spirit qi that was not suitable for martial artists to cultivate, she excluded it. This process would normally take a few months or even a year for talented martial artists. With the help of the Enlightenment Spirit Pill, Luo Qingtong could easily distinguish the spirit qi and draw it into her body very quickly. Chapter 2286. The spirit qi entered Luo Qingtong's body. Soon, the cultivation technique in Luo Qingtong's body was activated. It quickly carried the spirit qi around in Luo Qingtong's body. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 36 rounds. After 1 round of circulation, Luo Qingtong's energy center produced a strand of power. Boom. The moment this strand of power appeared, Luo Qingtong's spirit qi and medicinal power were mobilized. Soon, the spirit qi in the girl's body became stronger and stronger. The spirit qi circulation in her body also became faster and faster. Boom. 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 The spirit qi in Luo Qingtong's meridians surged like waves in the sea and roared like thunder and dragons. Waves of dragon and tiger roars were emitted from her body. Then each wave was louder than the previous one, and each wave followed the previous one. Luo Qingtong's skin rippled violently due to the thunderous sound of the tide of power. Boom. 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 The spirit qi in Luo Qingtong's body became stronger and stronger. In the next second, bam! The spirit qi in Luo Qingtong's body exploded. In an instant, countless spirit qi flew in all directions. In just a moment, the entire room shook. This was a residence that Song Cheng had specially prepared for her. Ordinary venerables would not be able to destroy this room. Not to mention the array formation that Luo Qingtong had set up. The peak of the Holy Venerate Realm. I'm about to step into the Venerate Realm. Luo Qingtong smiled and held her hand. She felt the surging power in her body. It felt so good to have her strength back. And this time she had clearly surpassed the 9th Holy Venerate Realm and could break through to the Venerate Realm at any time. Although she was still a little short, Luo Qingtong was not in a hurry. After all, she had already reached this level. It was only a matter of time before she entered the Venerate Realm. The absorption of her spirit qi this time brought her many benefits. In comparison, Temporarily losing her spirit chi for a period of time and being called trash was no big deal. Luo Qingtong's lips curled up as she thought of this. She looked up at the sky outside. Seeing that it was still dark, she immediately raised her hand and prepared to put away the square immortal cauldron. However, just as she was about to move, she suddenly caught a glimpse of a certain place in the square immortal cauldron from the corner of her eye. Luo Qingtong's hand stopped. The square immortal cauldron. The square immortal cauldron was in the square immortal cauldron was in the square immortal cauldron. The spirit. When Luo Qingtong obtained this square immortal cauldron, she knew that this immortal cauldron was extraordinary. However, she was not strong enough at that time, so she did not open this immortal cauldron. Gradually, she forgot about the immortal cauldron. Now that she saw that place again, Luo Qingtong immediately recalled what had happened. At that time her spirit chi was too weak. Now that she was a holy venerate or even close to it, could she open the square immortal cauldron spirit chi? Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed with a bloody light as she thought of this. She sucked the square immortal cauldron in front of her and carefully examined it. Then her bloody eyes flashed. Chapter 2287. Bang! Luo Qingtong struck the seal in her hand and directly slapped the sun-moon-mountain-river diagram of the square immortal cauldron. Very quickly, waves of white light emerged from the divine cauldron. The aura of these white lights was very powerful, and they constantly wandered around the square immortal cauldron. Luo Qingtong's power was greatly hindered. The bloody light in her eyes flickered. Very quickly, she resisted the power of these white lights and slapped out 2 more times. In an instant, with a boom, the aura of this divine cauldron suddenly flourished. Then in the next second, ka. The entire cauldron suddenly rotated from nearly 1/3 of the top of the cauldron. The entire cauldron split into 2 halves in an instant, revealing a space that looked like a mezzanine. The amazing thing was that this space clearly existed in the cauldron, but before Luo Qingtong opened it, she couldn't see the existence of this space in the entire square immortal cauldron. At this moment, the mezzanine of the divine cauldron opened, and Luo Qingtong could see the appearance of this space. Illusory form pill? Luo Qingtong looked at the pill formula that was revealed and raised her hand to take it out. At the same time, there was a medicinal herb that emitted an extremely strong medicinal power. The medicinal power contained in this medicinal herb was so strong that it almost forced Luo Qingtong to take 2 steps back. One had to know that the aura of medicinal power was the softest. Under normal circumstances, it didn't have any offensive power. However, the medicinal power emitted by the medicinal herb in front of Luo Qingtong was actually like an exposed sword aura, full of offensive power and pressure. It could be seen that the grade of this medicinal herb was very high. It was definitely not an ordinary item. Could it be a divine item of heaven and earth? Luo Qingtong looked at this medicinal herb and guessed in her heart. In this world, there were some top-grade medicinal herbs that were born naturally. Regardless of grade or medicinal power, they were not comparable to ordinary high-grade medicinal herbs. These medicinal herbs already contained spirituality. There were even medicinal herbs that were tens of millions of years old that could transform into a human form. They were extremely rare. Of course, just like plants that had turned into spirits, it was extremely difficult for these medicinal herbs to cultivate into a human form. However, the spirituality in their bodies was innate. It could be said that they were blessed by the heavens. Luo Qingtong looked at this medicinal herb and secretly guessed whether this medicinal herb was such a divine item of heaven and earth or not. However, upon closer inspection, this medicinal herb seemed to be only a small section. Even if it was a divine item of heaven and earth, it would only be a small part of its body. It contained a limited amount of spirituality, and it couldn't be cultivated. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she frowned and felt a little regretful. At this moment, she heard little pigs. Blood-weeping parasol tree? Little pigs stared at the herb that looked like a dried-up twig. The other party's branches were thick and strong, twisting and turning in a spiral. Looking at it, there was a kind of majestic and boundless aura. Was? On. Holy shit. Holy shit. This is the true blood of a phoenix that has successfully undergone nirvana. Chapter 2288. The blood-weeping parasol tree actually contained the true blood of a phoenix that had successfully undergone nirvana. The phoenix itself was already an ancient divine beast. After successfully undergoing nirvana, it was close to the level of a divine beast of heaven and earth. Even the realm beast, which was born and nurtured by the heavens and earth, was the heavenly Tao's favorite, could be compared to it. A phoenix that had successfully undergone nirvana was equivalent to surpassing the level of an ancient divine beast and reaching a whole new realm. Who would have thought that the blood-weeping parasol tree actually contained the true blood of a phoenix that had successfully undergone nirvana? If it was refined into a pill and swallowed, the person would immediately obtain the power of the raging true fire that was comparable to a phoenix's. Moreover, because it was inherited from a phoenix that had successfully undergone nirvana, the power of the raging true fire was even greater than any fire element power in the world. Sigh, it's a pity that there's too little true blood of a phoenix in it. It's not enough to form a pill. Little Pig was excited when he discovered that the blood-weeping parasol tree contained very little true blood of a phoenix. There was only a little on the surface of the blood-weeping parasol tree, and the insides weren't soaked. Even if this true blood of a phoenix was refined, it still wasn't enough to form a pill. What a pity. Little Pig's excited expression instantly disappeared when he thought of this. What the hell was worse than seeing a treasure, only to discover that it was just an empty shell when you eagerly rushed up to it? You could only look at it to satisfy your craving but couldn't use it? Little Pig's ears, which had been raised up, instantly drooped down like a frosted eggplant. On the other hand, Luo Qingtong glanced at the blood-weeping parasol tree before looking at the pill recipe in her hand. Then, her lips curled up as she said, "That's right. I'm afraid this blood-weeping parasol tree isn't used to refine the pill you mentioned. It's used to refine the illusory form pill." As she spoke, she handed the pill recipe in her hand to Little Pig. Little Pig caught the pill recipe with his two little hooves and glanced at it. Then his eyes widened. Holy crap, this person is a genius. Just who was the one who developed this pill? Is 2F* king? Awesome. Little Pig's eyes widened as he looked at the pill recipe's introduction. The words written on it were, Illusory Form Pill, Origin Pill. It can be infused with the blood of spirit beasts of heaven and earth, and after consuming it, it can transform into the original form of a spirit beast. Depending on the strength of the medicinal herbs and the level of the transformed spirit beast, one could obtain 1/10 to 1/5 of the transformed spirit beast's strength. The time limit was 1 hour. Oh my god. This illusionary form pill was simply awesome to the heavens. No wonder there was a blood-weeping parasol tree beside this pill formula. Didn't this mean that if Luo Qingtong was able to refine the medicinal pills on the list? With the true blood of the phoenix from the blood-weeping parasol tree, she could transform into the appearance of the phoenix that had successfully undergone nirvana and possess at least 1/10 of its original strength? *CK. That was awesome. Little Pig's eyes were wide open. A phoenix's true body that had successfully undergone nirvana, if it was one of the best in the phoenix clan, it would have strength that was not inferior to its true body. Wow, what the *CK. Did that woman Xuanhuan know what kind of treasure she had given to his master? She probably didn't know, otherwise she would have vomited blood and died from anger. Ha ha ha. Little Pig laughed as he thought about it. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.